Hi, I'm Joel. I'm an amateur sourdough maker, and I have been watching a lot of tutorials over the years and have found that they are long and sometimes really tedious. I've learned to make sourdough bread in a way that, in my mind, is just very simple and attainable to people who don't have a lot of specialized equipment in the kitchen. So I'm going to go through this technique today. What you need on hand is a simple kitchen scale. Digital scale works great. You need some sea salt, any non-iodized salt, some distilled water. I like to pre-warm mine, some good bread flour, and of course your sourdough starter. Some of the things we'll be using today is a simple kitchen bowl, a spoon, a thin towel like a tea towel. Later on we'll be employing some flour and a strainer to sift the flour, and a serrated knife, pizza stone, and a standard kitchen oven. Okay, first goes in 10 grams of salt. I like to knock that over to one side, and I'm going to zero out my kitchen scale and bring in 80 to 100 grams of my sourdough starter. This is freshly grown, beautiful starter. 80 to 100 grams of this. I'll probably aim for 90, but I never know what I'm going to get because it's gloopy stuff. Okay, there's 95 grams of starter. And now we're going to bring in 400 grams of bread flour. You can use all-purpose flour, but you might want to use a little more flour or a little less water in your recipe if you're using all-purpose flour. And finally, 300 grams of warm water, not too hot. We're done with the scale. And now we'll use that same spoon to just bring it all together. And so this is all worked together. I spent a minute or two getting this all into one sticky, shaggy mass. And you can see it stuck to my fingers, stuck to my spoon. And I just kind of scrape it off. And we're gonna let this rest so the flour can just absorb the water. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes. And we still have our shaggy, sticky mass, but now the water has had time to really integrate into the flour, and so we're ready for our first turn, our first stretch and fold. I'm going to wet my hand with warm water, just from the tap. Get used to this. Every time the wet hand goes in, and stretch, and fold it over, stretch, and I like to kind of jiggle it and let it hang off my hand and stretch a bit. And then I usually kind of fold it over itself using the bowl for leverage and really get that dough mix. My first stretch and fold is actually pretty aggressive. To finish mixing everything together. And you can see it's already a smoother ball of dough than it was before. And I'll let that rest. Well, it's been about 45 minutes since that first stretch and fold. You'll notice the dough has not grown. And this is where I want to talk to you for just a moment about how sourdough works. It's a slow process. And as we stretch and fold every 30 to 60 minutes, we're not only developing the gluten to develop structure in the dough, but we're allowing the microbes in the dough to ferment and to convert the material in the flour, water, and salt into the good stuff that makes it sourdough bread. So I'm going to do another stretch and fold now. This is stretch and fold number 2. And again, I'm getting a little more gentle now, and I just stretch and fold it over itself. Again, I like to kind of do some extra steps that allow it to develop that gluten even more. And the dough really is starting to get smooth and supple, but it's not feeling billowy yet by any means. I'm going to stretch and fold about once every 30 to 60 minutes for around 3 or 4 hours. And at the end of this process, you should notice the dough gets a bit bigger and billowier, and at that stage we'll be ready for the final rise. Third stretch and fold. At this stage, you may be wondering how long this process is going to take. And it largely depends on, well, a few things. First, the activity of your starter. If it's a really good active starter, your dough will ferment faster. If the temperature is higher, the dough will ferment faster. But faster isn't always better. But I have had days where I was in a little bit of a hurry, and I kept the dough in kind of an oven with the light on to keep things toasty, and it fermented really fast. And I could get the job done in 3 or 4 hours. But the best sourdough bread comes from a nice slow ferment. So we'll keep waiting. All right. So it's starting to get a bit inflated. Doing the next stretch and fold, being more gentle now because there's gas in there and we want to preserve that. Okay. Okay. Well, I've done a couple of stretch and folds, not filmed. The dough is getting nice and inflated. I'm going to do one more stretch and fold very gently. See, it doesn't really stretch the same anymore. It's full of gas. I'm going to fold it over one more time. That's great. Now we're going to get the final proof going. So what I'm going to do, flour the top of the dough pretty generously. I'm just going to let it drop onto my hand. And now the towel goes into the bowl. Coat it with flour. Drop it in. And now we'll wait about 2 hours for the final rise. Okay, now to get our oven ready, we are going to have a tray with rocks in it. This is going to be a source of steam when we add ice cubes to that. So that I'm going to put it at the bottom of the oven, and we'll put our pizza stone here, and we'll preheat to 475. Okay, it's been about a little over 2 hours. Our dough is looking great. Okay, the process from here is to be careful. The oven's at 475. We've got our pizza stone ready. This is just going to be flipped onto that stone. Okay. I'm going to get a serrated knife, and I'm going to make a couple of nice cuts. Close that. Ice goes here. And we'll come back in 20 minutes or so to see how things are. Okay, after about 20 minutes or so, we've got a pretty nice loaf. I'm going to put it back in the oven. It's got the color I want, but now we just need to develop the crust. So I've got the oven off now, and I'm just going to kind of put that there and allow some ventilation and allow it to stay hot without baking more. It's just going to kind of cure the crust. Okay. About 15 minutes of curing with the door partially open should do it. And we'll take the loaf out. And let it cool in this rack for a good hour or two before even thinking about cutting into it. Well, let's have a look inside.